Dear students, welcome to the course of Architecture and Town Planning. I'm your teacher Ravinder Kumar Khiani, Assistant Professor, Department of Architecture and Planning, NED University of Engineering and Technology, Karachi, Sindh, Pakistan. Since last class, we are discussing the topic of communication, and today we will discuss about the development of the airport, seaport, and harbor facilities. So let's begin our lecture. Introduction to an airport. What is an airport? An airport is an aerodrome with extended facilities, mostly for commercial air transport. An aerodrome or airdrome is a location from which aircraft flight operation takes place, regardless of whether they involve air cargo, passenger, or neither. Aerodromes include small general aviation airfields, large commercial airports, and military air bases. The term airport may imply a certain stature. It means having satisfied certain certification criteria or regulatory requirements that an aerodrome may not have achieved. This means that all airports are actually aerodromes, but not all aerodromes are airports. A water aerodrome is the area of open water used regularly by seaplanes or amphibious aircraft for landing and taking off. According to International Civil Aviation Organization (ICAO), an aerodrome is a defined area on land or water, including any building, installations, and equipment intended to be used either wholly or in part for the arrival, departure, and surface movement of aircraft. Airports often have facilities to store and maintain aircraft and a control tower. An airport consists of a landing area, which comprises an airly accessible open space, including at least one operationally active surface, such as a runway for a plane to take off or a helipad, and often includes adjacent utility buildings such as control towers, hangars, and terminals. Larger airports may have airport aprons, taxiway bridges, air traffic control centers, passenger facilities such as restaurants and lounges, and emergency services. Now there are different types of air traffic. Let's discuss about them. Basically, there are two major types of air traffic. One is air carrier traffic and general aviation. The detail of which is as follows. What is air carrier traffic? These types of air traffic usually related to public sector of air transport industry, which offer air services as regular scheduled services or as non-scheduled or on charter basis services for the carriage of both international and domestic passengers and the freight traffic. Then there is general aviation. This type of air traffic covers all the other civil aviation which serves the specific private users, such as business and personal travel, agricultural spraying, aerial survey, or self-piloted recreational flying. Then we must understand about the air traffic growth, how air traffic growth in recent past. One of the significant elements of airways and air transport is growth of air traffic, which causes both positive and negative impacts on the development of airports. For instance, the advantage of air traffic growth is reduction in the cost of air travel, which cause progressive improvements in aircraft performance in terms of increase in payload, speed, and range. Whereas the disadvantages of traffic growth and increasing size and performance of the aircraft are growing problems of air congestion, loss of amenity, and congestion of ground transport between airports in major urban contexts or major urban centers. Now, what are the potential future development in airways and air transport? Let's talk about the future development in airways and air transport. The continued growth in the air traffic and airport congestion create an interest for the development of short takeoff and landing, stall, and vertical takeoff and landing (VTOL) aircraft for widespread use of air carriers. The commercial stall and VTOL aircraft would be smaller than the conventional short-haul aircraft and would operate on inner-city routes or from special airports which are more centrally located within a city. The adoption of stall and VTOL serve better if new short landing strips, air corridors, and approach paths are developed separate from those used by the conventional aircraft. Currently, the operating and development cost of the stall and VTOL is high than the conventional air traveling. However, in future, the further improvements in the technology shall help to remove this difference, and there may be tough competition between different airlines. It is quite evident that the size of the aircraft shall increase in future for medium and long haul services, whereas it is uncertain that what would be the impact of supersonic passenger services. Now let's talk about the airport and its development. The basic premise of an efficient airway transport is the airport and its development. Without understanding the airport and its development, the concept of airways and air transport cannot be comprehended. Basically, there are three major aspects regarding airport and its development. First, the function of the airport. Second is the location of the airport. And third is the facility of an airport. What are the functions of an airport? The primary function of an airport is to provide safe and efficient means of interchange between air and ground transportation. Secondly, airport is the center from which control is exercised over air traffic on defined air routes and on approaches to the airports. The airports differ in terms of size, nature, and traffic handled, and the types of air traffic control. This differs all the airports around the world. In USA, the Federal Aviation Authority developed a classification of urban areas with respect to air transport or air traffic hub or the number of passengers handled at the airport. So they have categorized the airport based on the air traffic and number of passengers. Now let's talk about the location of an airport. It is very important for the town planner or urban engineer or a civil engineer. The required land area for an airport is due to three major factors. Number one, the nature and scale of traffic handled and its rate of growth. Number two, the physical and climatic characteristics of the site. Number three is the performance and characteristics of current and future aircraft. That is the number, length of, and configuration of the required runways. So these are the major you can say criteria through which location of an airport is decided. Similarly, for acceptable location of airports, there are three significant operational factors. One is the air traffic control requirements, that is the minimal interference to and from traffic control operations of neighboring airports. There should not be a nearby airports. Secondly, height obstruction and other navigational hazards, such as tall buildings, smoke, and birds, which can affect the movement of the aircraft. Then prevalent weather conditions, including wind disturbance and incidents of fog and snow that may cause difficulty for the aeroplane to function properly. Apart from these operational factors, there are also some major planning and social factors which affect the location of an airport. For example, location of airport needs a balance between the wind and noise of an area. Then provision of accessibility from center of population it serves. Then travel time and cost of the surface transport to the airport, how people are coming to airport and going from the airport. Fourth, the connection to the rapid transit system and public-private transport. For example, if you go to Hong Kong, in the airport, as soon as you come out of the airport, you have three options to go away to your home or your places. For example, you will have a metro rail connected to the airport. It comes directly inside the airport. And then there is a bus system and a minibuses system, and then there is a rickshaw and taxi system. So you can have your own choice of transport from airport to your houses and from houses to airport. This is very important. Now look at this airport and its development. There are various, at least 18, you can say, areas of the airport. First, there should be a proper runway lighting. That is very important. And then there should be de-icing areas in situations of the cold areas, the pre-threshold areas, the PAPI area, the runway designator area, the center line area, the touchdown zone, the aiming point, the threshold, the stopway, the holding position, the edge marking, high speed way, and the helicopter stand and fire station and airline services and bus stop and taxi stand. So all these elements should be there. And here you can see the asphalt, concrete and facilities which are designed, how the airport is designed. Let's go ahead. Planning and design of airport facilities, how airport is designed. From the viewpoint of planning and designing of an airport facility, one of the important goals is to arrange the free flow of passengers and goods. There shall be a balance of capacity throughout in all facilities in airport, so as the risk of congestion may be minimized, because the congestion may affect the operation and operating efficiency of an entire airport complex. There are two types of functional areas within an airport. One is operational areas, or known as airside areas, and other is terminal areas or landside areas. What are airside areas? As we have discussed in previous figure, that these include such facilities as runways, taxiways, aircraft holding areas. Then in the design and performance of these facilities, special care is given to the system of air traffic control, which determines the operational capacity of an airport and the servicing and maintenance areas or the operational buildings of the airport. Then comes landside areas. Primarily, these include such buildings and facilities which provide the means of interchange for both passenger and goods, or between ground transport and the air transport. The design concept of landside areas evolved from the simple low-capacity terminal buildings to high-capacity layouts, which are popularly termed as finger terminals. The current design concept is to decentralize certain functions such as ticketing, baggage handling, and passenger waiting, and sorting areas into separate smaller units or the satellites. Secondly, it is the main design criteria to provide the passenger terminals with a convenient and efficient access to both public and private land transport, to adequate parking facilities by avoiding long walking distances within terminals. Thirdly, now it is mandatory that there should be efficient baggage handling and smooth processing of passengers through governmental controls such as customs, immigration, and health. Finally, a flexible layout that can accommodate rapid technological change and expression is a prerequisite of a contemporary airport design. After understanding the airport and its development, let's look at a small video how an airport is developed in Vietnam. This is the airport with landside areas, airside areas, and terminal building. This is the terminal building, and you can see the overall design of the airport. This is a green airport. Sustainability is the major feature of its design. Here you can see the overall 3D view of the airport and the connectivity of road network with it. Now let's look at the departure lounge developed and designed in this airport. This is where the passenger will arrive, and this is a very green space, beautifully looking. connected to the public transport. And here we are entering in the departure lounge. On the left lower corner, you can see the plan of the airport and the areas which are being viewed in this video. You see the red color mark in the center. This is the area. So you can also look at the plan on the left side as it appears and the 3D areas which are you are looking. This is the central lounge areas for people sitting, eating, other activities. So this is like a terminal building we are looking at. These are the wings of the airport which connects the passengers to the airside areas. Now we will look at the arrival. When the plane arrives, it is connected to this corridor and people just walk on these corridors, or there are conveyor belts, and then they reach into this area, that is immigration. So as soon as they come inside the immigration, they come to this area where they collect their goods and bags. Now there comes the central lounge where people can receive their passengers. You see there is an open spaces also developed, and people have very good environment within the airport. Now you come out of the airport. This is a green airport or futuristic approach to the airport design. With vast spaces organized in a sequence. This is the landscape, this is the airside areas, this is the terminal building, and this is the landside areas. So you see overall futuristic airport. Now let's talk about the waterways, seaports, harbors and docks. The economic planning of any region is based on the availability of the commercial docks and harbors, because at micro scale it affects the land use of an urban area, and at macro scale location of main urban centers depends upon it. What is the need of ports and harbor? The seaports are required to boost any economy, essentially for import and export of goods and due to increase in trade and commerce. Especially, there is an abject need of deep water berths and dry area steadily increasing in size. Dead weight of minimum ship is 45,000 tons. So we need these deep water berths and dry areas. Apart from that, there is a greater demand of docks and seaports due to oil cargo, because oil is the basic you can say factor in the economy, which caused phenomenal expansions of the ports all over the world, western world and even eastern world. What is it? Is retrospect of the ports and harbor. Retrospect means history. Okay, so retrospect of ports and harbor. The earlier largest port of the world is developed at Rotterdam. You can see the figures on the right. You can see the port of Rotterdam, for which vessels mentioned above. However, after the Second World War, the harbors and seaports were rebuilt to accommodate the larger ships of at least 100,000 tons dead weight. It is necessary to mention here that after the construction of underwater oil pipelines, the need for such larger ports reduced to greater extent throughout the world. However, whenever such pipelines are in evident, and the demand for larger ports increases. What is the impact of port and harbor? The major impact of large seaport emerge at the dockyard area in the city, because it creates a congestion and change in the land use to evident needs for large storage spaces and in large or upcountry transport facilities. So these are the both, you can say, important factors where the ports and harbor develops. How we can achieve the efficiency of port and harbor? The inland transport system contributes greatly to port efficiency because it is necessary to make earlier arrangement for delivery of exports and collection of impact from the docks as efficient as possible. They require a good transportation system. Another major issue regarding seaport and docks is the shift of the goods and transport from railways to roadways. It requires quite profound adjustment. For example, the Karachi port, when Pakistan came into being in 1947, the 98% of the goods from the seaport of Karachi go to upcountry through the railways that the British have developed. But then we have just transferred ourselves from railways to roadways. And as a repercussion, a major shift and congestion took place in the city, and this is still a major issue. A planner must make constant surveillance of the reversal of these trends and the land use potential around the port so as the surrounding sites can be utilized for taking best economic advantage of the seaport and harbor. What is the definition of port and harbor? Harbor is an area of sea protected naturally or artificially as to afford shelter and refuge to the vessels during their storm. A harbor can also be termed as a place where vessels could be built, launched, or repaired, and where ships could lie at an anchor with safety and security during the loading and unloading operations of cargo and people. You can see on your right figures. Kindly, when I'm talking to you or discussing, reading this text which I've written, you must look at the visuals on your right side so that you can understand what I'm talking about, because visually I've shown everything on the right side. Okay, let's go ahead. Port and harbor classification. How do we classify the port and harbor facilities? According to Encyclopedia Britannica, a harbor is a partly enclosed protected water area to provide safe and suitable accommodation for vessels seeking refuge, supplies, refueling, repairs, or the transfer of the cargo. So this is the reason we develop a harbor. Whereas port is a terminus or an intermediate station in a sea route, port more appropriately it can be said that when terminal facilities are added to a harbor, it can be termed as a port. So now you can classify or differentiate between the port and the harbor. The classification of harbor and ports can be made on three basic determinants. First, the nature of port and harbor, the function of port and harbor, and the location of port and harbor. What is the natural classification? The natural classification of harbor is of three types. That is harbor, semi-natural harbor, and the artificial harbor. Sorry, the natural harbor, the semi-natural harbor, and the artificial harbor. What is natural harbor? It is the harbor which is protecting from storms and waves through natural land contours and rocky outcrops or islands on any sea or at the edge of the sea. The basic issue in natural harbor design is the formation of its entrance in such a manner to ensure calm in the harbor. Water should be still, because if there are so many waves, large waves, then it will be difficult for a ship to stay as a position. The harbors of New York, London, Sydney, and Bombay can be cited as the natural harbor. Then there are semi-natural harbors. Semi-natural harbors are the harbors which is protected on sites by headland, that is cape, a peninsula, a cliff, or a bluff. The semi-natural harbor may be in the form of plymouth or pocket, in which the design issue is to protect only the entrance of the harbor for the navigation of the ships. Then comes the artificial harbor. The man-made harbor, which is protected from storms and waves through a breakwater, which breaks the speed limit of the waves. What is breakwater? It is a water which is having a still water which breaks the speed limit of the waves. The artificial harbor can be created or designed through dredging. And for protection or breakwater, a rubble mound or vertical wall is made so as water can stand still. Then there is functional classification. What is functional classification? The functional classification of harbor is again of three types. That is commercial harbor, military harbor, and harbor of refuge. Commercial harbor. From the economic point of view, the commercial harbor is most significant of all harbor types because its main function is to accommodate the mercantile marine for loading and unloading of the cargo and for transaction of the trade. Commercial harbor. The commercial harbor have special requirements of docks, quays, transit sheds, warehousing, overhauling, machinery, and means of communication such as roads and railways connected to it. The commercial harbors are mainly developed along sea coast, mouth of the rivers, inside the estuaries, and inside or along the bank of rivers and canals. Most of the time, the commercial harbors are either the part of the bigger harbor complex or make independently as units of single commodity terminals such as oil terminal, coal port or fishery harbor for fishing trawlers. If you look at the Indus River, all the trade from Mohenjo-daro to the other civilization took place through Indus River because there was no, you can say, bridges on the Indus River, and British have changed the whole, you can say, ecology of our Indus River. Otherwise, we would have a lot of harbors and ports along the Indus River. Some of the significant examples of these specialized unit purpose commercial harbors are Karachi Port, Bin Qasim Port, Gwadar Port, Sydney Port, San Francisco Port, London Port, and New York harbors. Then there is military harbor. The military harbor is also known as a naval base. The main purpose of military harbor is obviously to accommodate the naval craft and to serve as a supply depot. The major examples are Hawaii and Pearl Military Harbor of USA. In the case of Karachi and Bombay, the harbors are essentially a commercial complex with oil terminals, general cargo berths, and a naval base, which are the unique examples in the world because they have all three functions come together. Then there is harbor of refuge. Such harbors which provide shelter and security to the vessels in case of sudden storms are known as harbor of refuge. These harbors are developed and located along dangerous coasts with easily accessible station. There are three basic requirements of harbor of refuge. First, ready accessibility. Secondly, sea and commodious anchorage. And third, facilities for obtaining supplies and to execute the minor repairs of the ships. The size of refuge harbor is based on the maximum number of ships to be accommodated and the size of largest vessels likely to visit the harbor. The harbor of refuge also used as a naval basis during the war times and equipped with adequate means of defense. The popular example of refuge harbors are Sand Bay Harbor on eastern coast of USA and Outer Harbor of Madras and the Vishakhapatnam, which are both refuge and commercial harbors. Location classification. From location viewpoint, harbors can be classified in four basic types. It includes sea or ocean harbor, river and estuary harbor, canal harbor, and lake harbor. What are the requirements and main features of a harbor? Let's look at it. Harbor requirements and main features. There are 6 basic requirements of harbors and 10 basic features. The harbor requirements include the easy access, adequate accommodation, safe anchorage, repair facilities, supplies facilities such as jetties, berths, transit sheds, warehousing, cranes, hotels, banks, post offices, roads, and railways. The main feature of harbor are appropriate entrance, approach channels, both inner and outer, turning basin, shelter basin, breakwaters, wharfs and quays, jetties and piers, locked and located basin, dry docks and slipways, and ancillaries, including location mooring, anchor, lights, transit shed, warehousing, fire protection towers, etc. etc. How the planning and design of harbour takes place. There are four major factors or determinants of harbour provision in a city. These include need, economic justification, expected volume of commerce, and inland communication availability. A need of harbour primarily emerged due to military reasons, that is naval base or air base. Secondly, the growth of town may reach to such extent when foreign trade and commerce become an abject need of the city. Thirdly, if the city starts producing certain products or commodity which requires to be exported, then the port develops. For instance, the port Bin Qasim in Karachi developed due to a steel mill in the city. The economic justification is evaluated on the basis of income and social benefits above the capital cost and operating cost of harbour. The expected volume of commerce required extensive studies and survey of city and its hinterland produce. The inland communication availability is judged by existing roads, rail, air and inland waterway transportation system. For the decision regarding location of harbour, various types of data is collected. It includes the site investigation, the hydrographic charts, which consists information about the depth of the water, characteristics of the bottom, and a range of tides. The other data includes wind movement, temperature, and rainfall. Aerial contour mapping also. The final site selection is based on the maximum natural protection from wind and waves, water depth to accommodate large ships, appropriate seabed, which could ship anchors with less capital, maintenance, and dredging cost. After selection of site, the next step is to develop the port layout and cost estimate. Though there is no specific rule to make the layout of the harbour, however, the planner must consider the littoral drift, protection from stormwater, wharfs and jetties, and erosion and siltation processes. Following are the example of sample layouts of natural and artificial harbours, which I have designed specifically for you, so you must have a sketch to have understanding about the design of the port and harbour. Here you can see this is a typical layout of an artificial harbour, how it is made, and you can see that there is a dry dock, there is a natural wharf, there is an oil pier, the breakwater approach basin, the turning basin, the ship is coming and going away. There should be 2,400 meter dia boat basin, and the breakwater and the winds and waves is controlled through this breakwater wall. And this is a layout of the natural harbour, where you can find that naturally there is a space for safe anchorage, that is 12 square miles. And this is a layout of the natural harbour. And the following you can also, in the bottom you can also see different types of artificial and natural harbours. After understanding the port and harbour development and port and harbour facilities, let's look at a small case study of port and harbour development.
The Port of Newcastle is a nationally significant global gateway. Since the first shipment left the port in 1799, the port and the city of Newcastle have grown and prospered together. The Port of Newcastle continues to play a significant role as an economic driver and catalyst for growth throughout the region and Australia. The Port Master Plan provides a blueprint for the port's strategic development opportunities to 2040. The port's existing coal export trade, together with bulk commodities such as fuel and wheat, will continue to provide a stable foundation for our region. However, the Port of Newcastle has embarked on an ambitious diversification strategy that will leverage its natural advantages. Key projects include the Newcastle Container Terminal, the Newcastle Bulk Terminal, an automotive and ro-ro hub, the Maritime Precinct, the Newcastle Cruise Terminal. These key projects are underpinned by 5 goals. Promote the capacity of the port and the supply chain to support the economy. utilise the existing road and rail transport assets to support the growing freight task. Grow, attract and facilitate new trades and supply chains. Support the development of new facilities to leverage investment and improve productivity. The port and its transport corridors operate 24 hours a day. Protecting the portland from urban encroachment is critical to efficient operations. As the custodians of the port into the next century, we are committed to working with our partners, stakeholders and the community to ensure that the port can continue to grow its diverse trade base, deliver substantial port development and provide economic benefits to our region and Australia.
So you have seen how the port and harbour development is taking place abroad. Now let's look at what is happening in our country, Pakistan. In Pakistan, the port and harbour development is taking place in Gwadar. So let's see this small case study about the Gwadar. What's happening in the Gwadar, Pakistan? A small fishing town in the southwest of Pakistan, Gwadar is the gateway city of China with $62 billion economic corridor. Gwadar is a deep sea port strategically located in the Indian Ocean at the opening of the Strait of the Hormuz. In 2015, Pakistan leased Gwadar port to China as a part of a $52 billion deal. China also required 22,000 acres of land adjoining the port in Gwadar, which has been declared as a special economic zone. A 12-24-kilometer highway is being built from China, ending at Gwadar, simulating an ancient Silk Road. Gwadar will link the Silk Road on the land with the maritime Silk Road. The new Silk Road reduces the shipping time for Chinese goods to the Middle East, Africa, Europe by 80%. Gwadar is being developed under the model of China's Shenzhen through the establishment of special economic zones. Shenzhen grew from a population of 30,000 in 1979 to 10 million in 2017 with a GDP of $94 billion. Zhang Guzan, the chairman of the China Overseas Port Holding the company, said China planned to spend $4.5 million in Gwadar. In November 2016, the first cargo traveled the Silk Route from Kashgar in China to Gwadar. It then shipped out from the Gwadar to Middle East and Africa. Currently, there are some 2,000 Chinese personnel in Gwadar, and this number is projected to grow up to 500,000 by 2023. There is a geopolitical shift happening in the world, and Gwadar is at the heart of this. So you have seen that how the China is helping us in developing our port. Port city is developing, so there is a town planning also, and then there is a port development also, and it go together. I think with this case study, I end my lecture. Thank you very much. Well, I must end my lecture here. These are the references for the lecture. Thanks for watching. For lecture notes, visit my blog www.townplanninglectures.blogspot.com. That's all, folks. Enough food for thought. Now take off the real food bite. Okay? Good luck and goodbye.